Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday night, June 27th to order. Welcome, Council. We're going to move right on into consent agenda. Is there any item that Council wants to pull tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to pull items 16 and 17.
All right. Any other items? All right. Entertain a motion approving consent last item, excuse me, items 16 and 17.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Gloria, item 16.
I pulled item 16 because I thought that it might be good for the residents to understand what's happening with the funding for Arch, and maybe Steve could tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Hopefully all of you know about the ARCH program. That was a program, actually a pilot program that started by Mary Greeley Medical Center to help assist the police department in responding to what are very important calls to people in distress, but non-emergency calls. So if you're responding to mental health assist calls, homeless calls, and calls in that vein. And the pilot program allows trained individuals who are trained in mental health assistance and de-escalation to respond to the calls in lieu of the police department. So I think it's two benefits here. We have what we have to admit is probably more highly trained people to deal with the specific needs of the people we're calling in. Plus, it frees up our police officer time if they don't have to respond to these ever-increasing number of calls. They'll be available for the emergency call. So the first pilot program was this year, seems to be very successful. And as you recall, you received a letter from Mary Greeley Medical Center hoping to expand the program beginning next fiscal year, which begins July 1st. It's about a $300,000 program. They hope to increase the number of hours per week from the pilot program up to, I believe, 60 hours per week. And they asked that the city fund half that cost. You received that letter during the budget time. The budget, you did appropriate $154,000, about half the cost of that program. Now, when we tried to find funding for it, I recommended it come out of the available balance or savings from the general fund. And therefore, it's been taken out of the balance and hasn't been actually embedded in our base budget yet. And the reason that's important is at the time I wasn't planning on the actions by the state legislature, which is going to tie our hands and restrict the amount of revenue we can generate from the general levy, which would normally go to finance this. So we have the money budgeted for next fiscal year. I just want everybody to understand as we prepare the year after's budget, it's starting in the fall or into the winter, it's going to be more difficult for us to incorporate that amount of money in there, or even if this program even wants to expand further. So I just want to put everybody on notice of that. I think I've been in touch with the Mary Greeley Medical Center people too. I'm hoping there will be other partners who will see benefits of this program and want to help contribute, or maybe we can assist Mary Greeley Medical Center in securing grant funding in the future. I think that's what we're going to have to look to first before we're going to have to make tough budget decisions related to the police department budget. So I hope that helps you, remind you where we are on that particular program.
I think that's very helpful. And when we gave our presentation at the International Town and Gown Association, there were a number of communities that were very interested in that ARCH program and asked a lot of questions about the success rate. And so I'm hoping that we can continue, but I also hope that we can help Mary Greeley find additional funding,
Right.
whether that be from partners or grants.
Right. And I might indicate in the budget that's proposed, we have some performance data. So they're going to capture that data for us and pass it on to us on a monthly basis. So we'll be able to make some decisions and evaluate the program and see how successful it really is in the future. So that's a good aspect of this contract, I believe.
Do we have any way to track or measure cost savings seen by the police department through reduced calls that they are responding to?
I don't think we need direct savings. It's availability of time because we're not going to necessarily keep those police officers off the street. They'll just be on the street available to respond to calls. And you can see there's more and more overlapping calls that come in. So we'll be able to probably do a better job in responding to calls. People won't have to wait as long. I certainly want to go to emergency calls first. But it's not like we're going to be able to reduce the number of people on the street. We could do that, but I don't think that's how we're going to approach it at the beginning. Now, because of the restrictions on the state, by the state legislature, we'll have to make some tough decisions about staffing, I think, in the future. But I don't think this program is necessarily going to save us money.
Sure. Thank you.
There are questions? Is there a motion?
I would move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I jumped on you.
All right, item 17.
I pulled item 17 because I was a little bit caught off guard by the blade sign. And the reason for that is when I first looked at the blade sign, even knowing it was ray gun, I didn't see a kitty with a ray gun. I saw a kitty with a machine gun. And it made me wonder whether other people would see the same thing. And in a community where we have had some rather high-profile gun violence in the last couple of years, I'm concerned about the content of that sign. And I know that that's Ray Gun's logo sign, but we have the option of approving a blade sign if they want to put that inside their building or on the front window of their building. We don't have control over that. We only have control over the right-of-way. And my concern would be for those who've been touched closely by gun violence. And that's my main issue with the sign. And I would not presume to legislate what Ray Gun can put on their building if it's not over the right-of-way.
Any other questions?
I have a question, I guess, for our city attorney as far as whether that's even permissible. We have a First Amendment, I think.
We already have the ability to approve whether there are blade signs over the right-of-way or not.
We do have the ability to approve the signs, like Gloria says. I think if you're doing it because you don't like the image or don't like the message, then that potentially creates a First Amendment concern.
Even though we have the right to not approve a blade sign.
Even though, because the reason for doing so is because of what's on the sign, and hence comes the First Amendment problem.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Approval has to be content neutral.
right.
Okay, we have Blake Crabb, like to address council on this item also. So Blake?
I guess my question would be whether Ray Gun would be willing to put something else on the blade sign besides that particular logo.
Blake?
My name is Blake Crabb. I'm Director of Operations for Ray Gun. I oversee the build out of the new store going in at 301 Main Street. The logo that Gloria is talking about is a standard logo that we use across all our stores. We have that specific design on over 75 of our products. We are certainly sensitive to the idea of gun violence in America and have discussed it at great lengths within our company. We sell many products that promote ending gun violence. We have hosted in our store former Congresswoman and gun violence survivor Gabby Giffords, as well as the organization Everytown, led by Mike Bloomberg. In 2018, we were blessed to host the Parkland shooting survivors at our Cedar Rapids store during the March for Our Lives movement. We compensate monthly to organizations against gun violence, such as Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. However, it is in our opinion that the ray gun that Gary the cat is holding is an imaginary space weapon. So we think it is different from an image of a handgun or an AR-15. And so we don't see how it could offend anyone or promote the idea of gun violence.
I don't intend to besmirch
Oh,
the reputation of Ray Gun by any means. I know the good things that you do. I just was very caught off guard by the image when I saw it. And I'm a gun owner. So when I saw that, my thought was just, what would this do to other people who maybe had been more closely impacted by those shootings here in Ames?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. It is weird, a cat holding a ray gun, which is kind of why we like it.
Yeah.
It catches people's attention and it turns them towards our store. We haven't had any negative comments from any customers about the sign, but we have had plenty of positive comments about it.
I just want to thank you for coming to town too, because you have a great reputation, and we're excited to have you on Main Street.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I would move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for coming, Blake. All right. We'll move on to public forum. This is a time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business that are not on the agenda. Ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone who wants to address council under public forum tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and we'll move on to item number 35, FY 24-25 asset priorities. Deb.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to be before you this evening to talk about the priorities for the fiscal year 24-25 funding cycle for asset, which will begin in September. And with me is Becky Harker. She is one of our city asset volunteers and is currently the vice chair on the asset administrative team. So we may have Ashley Thompson stepping in once we get into the discussion. But so before you is an outline of the priorities that we have for fiscal year 23-24. And if you recall, we added that overarching statement that an emphasis is placed on low to moderate income in all categories and services. And then we also adjusted last year the quality childcare, so we bumped that up. And then we also listed food as the first priority in meeting basic needs. Mental health was the top priority, and we have several services in the process that meet that mental health service priority. So that is what the current priorities are this current year. And then for next fiscal year, the information and feedback that I received from volunteers when I talked to them about these priorities, we just clarified that overarching statement to mean low to moderate income individuals and families in all of the categories and services. And then under number 2, meeting basic needs, we essentially flipped and put sheltering, including emergency shelter as the first priority under that section. And then food cost offset programs was flipped with that. So that's now the third priority. So those are essentially the main changes based on feedback from the volunteers, and we'd be happy to discuss or answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Feedback.
I hope that the priorities that we have are continuing to be useful to the volunteers. So, okay, so we don't have to rejigger things just because it's another year.
Right, right. Yeah, and the priorities are one of the many tools the volunteers use in determining their allocations for funders. So the priorities are heavily used, and then of course we've got liaison reports, the budgets, outcome data from scorecard, all of those tools.
And has that overarching emphasis been helpful in terms of thinking about the population that's most, that we have the most interest in serving? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Move approval of the asset priorities.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Becky, thank you for your efforts. I know that the volunteers spend a lot of time, and we're proud of the asset program. And so I think it's unsung heroes in terms of the amount of time and effort and making some big decisions, but you really help us accomplish objectives. So thank you very much.
I'm proud to be part of the process, so thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Deb, I just want, what's that? Stop it. Roll call, please. Thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Need someone to keep me on a straight and narrow.
good catch.
Yes.
For council knows this, staff knows this, public may not know, but this is Deb's last meeting. And Deb, we just want to thank you for all your efforts. I know you have been so instrumental with Asset and a lot of the human resources, or human services, and also with mental health. And we wish you well in your next endeavor. You'll be missed, but on behalf of council, thank you for what you've done. And we know you're not going very far, and we'll see you around, but we'll miss having you around City Hall.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your support, not only with the human service programs, but the other efforts that overlap with those services and making this such a great community to live in. It's been my pleasure serving for the city of Ames, and I look forward to still having those interactions and partnerships with my new role with Heartland Senior Services.
Deb, can you tell us, what was your first year working with Asset?
June of 2020.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, June of 2000. Yeah.
Just a little bit of historical perspective, so
Yeah.
awesome, thanks.
Yeah. I started going to meetings in like 1998, 1999, but I was served as the county's representative starting in 2000. So it's been one of my favorite roles in my jobs, and I really believe in the process, and now I'll get to experience that from an agency side. So, but it wouldn't happen without funders and supporters like City Council. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
So over the half, isn't the asset been in place for about 40 years?
Yeah, it started, well, Bob Kindred was one of the city representatives that helped start it. I think it was in the maybe early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. It had a different name at that point in time, and then, and evolved into Asset. So it's
Wow.
always had the current funders, the city, the county, United Way, and Iowa State Student Government. And then we used to have Department of Human Services at the table, and then they left when they did a large state restructuring. And the Central Iowa Community Services Mental Health Region was a funding partner for a period of time. So it's stood the test of time, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Moving on to item 36, property insurance program coverage. Bill.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. For those that don't know me, my name is Bill Walton. I'm the city risk manager, and I'm going to talk a little bit about property insurance. If I could direct your attention to the screen, this is a January 2020 to May 2023 chart on property rates, property insurance rates, and kind of tell you to show you what the market's been doing. It's been, the last few months have not been good to the insurance market. Kind of give you an idea of how we got where we are today. In January, well, let me start with, in 2022, there were 18 major storms that cost at least $1 billion each. In total, there was about $120 billion worth of loss through those 18 storms. That really hit the insurance market hard. There's not very many big players in the commercial market, commercial insurance market. So they took a lot of stress from that. In March of 2023, city staff met with Willis Towers Watson, who is our property insurance broker, and we started we had a renewal strategy meeting. They kind of laid out where the market was, staff told them about where we expected to be. And they went to our carriers, and in particular, Star, which is our power plant insurer, said we should be right in that area. 10 to 15% increase. The deductibles look good. In April, Willis Towers Watson went back to Star, and again, got the same message. In May, as of 5/1, Star kind of went quiet, but we did get confirmation, or Willis Towers Watson did get confirmation that, yep, deductibles look good, and we're still looking at that 10 to 15% range. Willis Towers Watson at that point decided that they should market our coverage. That takes a little bit of time. On June 15th, we did get the renewal quote from Chubb, our municipal properties, RSUI, our flood, and Star for the power plant. Willis Towers took that to the carriers that we were looking at. There were 7 of them, and none of them felt that they could meet or beat Star's quote. That quote was a 36% premium increase. They also raised deductibles on us, even though they'd been telling us that our deductibles look reasonable. So, for example, the combustion turbine generators went from a deductible of $350,000 to $500,000. The gas turbine went from $250,000 to $500,000. And again, Willis Towers Watson went back to those other carriers, and they said, "Yeah, those are the deductibles that are online." In fairness, Star had been trying to get us to raise those deductibles over the past few years, but the reward did not meet the risk. I mean, when you're talking about a few $1,000s worth of savings and doubling your deductibles, it just wasn't worth it. For the budget this year, we budgeted a 25% increase in premiums for the municipal property. And that includes terrorism. We raised it that much because we found that there was not coverage necessarily on every park, shelter, and playground equipment in the city. It'd been a number of years since they've looked at it, and we love our parks, so we've created a lot of new parks. We budgeted flood at a 10% increase in premium, and we budgeted power, at a 15% increase in premiums. If you look at the chart for the previous 9 months from September, we were below 10% increase, and actually it goes back 17 months below 15%. So staff felt that was a valid amount to shoot for. Unfortunately, our overall premium budget was expected to be 20%, and we did not make that. These numbers were based on our historical data, and they were in line with what the increases we were seeing in September 2022 and prior in the market. It's just in the last couple of months, insurance premium rates have jumped dramatically.
You mentioned 18 storms had affected the market. Do you mean nationally?
Nationally. So insurance, just like your homeowners, they spread the losses over everybody. You know, if you have a loss, they don't quadruple your rates. They have to take rate from everyone. It's interesting because of natural disasters in, say, California. There's 2 companies that have pulled out of California on the personal line and the commercial property altogether. They won't write business in that state anymore. It's definitely a difficult market right now. This is the worst, or hard, in insurance terms, we call it the hardest market we've seen since the early 1990s. And there's no end in sight right now. There's just fewer and fewer dollars available to spread out over all these companies.
But I have a question, and This is for the for FY 23, 24, right?
Yes.
So I didn't catch this the first time I went through this material. So Steve, maybe help me
Yes,
out.
I'll help you.
So how does this affect our approved budget?
Well, the budget is set at the projected rate increases we have, so it's come in significantly higher. So what we're going to have to do is we are going to take this proposal and we're going to ask our department heads, they will do adjusted budgets throughout the year. We will tell each department, and they're affected differently. Obviously, if you have a major facility in there, your property insurance will be more, but different programs will be affected differently. But they'll be asked to make adjustments in their budget. In other words, they'll have to find areas to reduce to offset this cost. The budget is set, so I can't change the budget now. Can't increase it to cover this. So we're gonna have to cut expenditures. And we do that 3 times a year. We adjust the budget, as you know, and we'll be asking the departments to do that.
So this is a difference of $200-some thousand. We have to find that savings.
No, it's a shortfall of, what is it, Bill, 100?
129,000, I believe.
What,
129,000.
104, but what-
104,209 is in this report.
$104,000.
There is.
Spread among a number of programs.
So anticipating a bad or a hard market, as you said, next year, is there any thoughts to maybe trying to get quotes earlier in
We will.
in the
We'll start
budgeting
marketing.
process?
We'll start marketing in February. Willis Towers Watson was trying to get quotes. I have my theories on why insurance companies were reluctant to quote with the excess or the reinsurance market. As volatile as it is, they probably didn't want to tie themselves down to a number, not knowing then come July 1 what that was actually going to cost them.
Plus, the stock market has been down, and they arbitrage a lot of their money in the stock market. And so with the stock market being down, their investments are down. You had a lot of storms. I mean, it was the worst of both worlds from the standpoint of.
That's exactly
I'm
right.
not trying to defend them. It's just more or less it was a convergence of a lot of things that really are affecting. And there's an article in the Wall Street Journal here today or yesterday that auto insurance premiums are just skyrocketing as well across the nation as well too. So it's going to hit everybody, I think.
The other piece is property values keep going up, which is good for your personal property, but not necessarily great when you're trying to insure properties.
So Bill, what's going to be, and maybe you don't know yet, would it be your counsel for the staff as they do the budgeting in the fall for the next fiscal year? I mean, this is a 24% increase. Do you presume it's a 25% increase and hope for the best?
I would start at 24 and then look over the next few months to see if the market continues to rise as it has been, and we may hit a higher number than that.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Just one about your statement that alternative underwriters are hard to find because of the unique property the city must insure. Are we different from other cities, and how?
Not on the municipal property,
Okay.
but with the power plant being using refuse-derived fuel, there's only roughly 71 of those in the country,
Okay.
and that does drive some insurers away because they're just not familiar with the process.
Thank you.
There's no further questions. Entertain a motion.
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
All right, item 37, motion approving a request from downtown Ames for fireworks permit for the Hairball concert.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Normally, the approval of a fireworks permit would be an item for the consent agenda, but there was a unique request associated with this particular one that we wanted to give you an opportunity to decide how to proceed. So this is for the fireworks display associated with the entertainment downtown for the Ragbri festivities in late July. The main act is hairball, and a key component of their act is the use of pyrotechnics on the stage. Our municipal code for a fireworks permit requires a $5 million insurance policy. And Hairball's fireworks shooter has indicated that they're more, that their experience indicates that an act of this type would normally have a $2 million liability insurance limit. And so they're requesting that the council waive the $5 million limit in order to accept their $2 million policy. Staff has reviewed the fireworks proposal and believes that it meets all the standards that we would have for approving a fireworks permit. But it really comes down to whether the council is willing to accept the lower policy limit. Hairball's indicated that it would save them about $1,200 in premium. But again, staff has not seen or has not ever experienced a request to lower that limit. So given the nature of shooting fireworks and the close proximity to buildings and the large crowds that are anticipated, staff can't recommend the approval of the lower limit, but it is up to the city council whether you'd accept that.
Ryan, would another option be that we just contribute $1,200 to the insurance, pay it out of council contingency, and call it a contribution for hopefully a wonderful event? Could we do that?
I suppose the council could do that, and you'd be requiring the higher limit,
Sure.
right?
So we go with the city's recommendation, have the policy, it's $1,200.
But why would we subsidize them when we haven't subsidized other people who have wanted fireworks permits? That seems like it's not really fair to anyone else who applies for that.
We evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis. This is a major event for Ames. $1,200 is not a lot of money in the scheme of things. I think it's worth considering. You can vote against it, but I'm interested in just getting this done and not overthinking this.
So another question, maybe in the same vein, not from the city. This event is not the local event. Is it sponsored by RAGBRAI? Is this a RAGBRAI event?
So RAGBRAI has booked the act. I don't know all of the intricacies of who's paying for it and what the exchange of money is
Because we
and so
charge
forth.
a lot of costs back. RAGBRAI generates money,
Yeah.
our local group generates money from booths and things like that. It can be something we can see if we charge it back to them. I don't know if that's possible or not. As you said, $1,200 is probably, one stand probably makes more than that for them. So it works either way. Either we pay for it or maybe RAGBRAI would pay for it.
So I'm looking for direction. Should we ask the staff to reach out to the RAGBRAI organizers to see if there are funds available to cover this? And
Yeah, we can surely do that. Right? Can we do that?
Well, if you
Part
have,
of the reimbursables?
well, if you
What do
do, we can do two motions. One is whether or not you're going to waive the 5 million for the 2 million. And then you can make a second motion in terms of directing staff to contact RAGBRAI or
I would,
cover Ames or whatever and see if there's ways that, I don't know.
if Hairball doesn't want to pay the additional $1,200, but we're requiring the higher insurance, I would leave that between Hairball and our local committee and RAGBRAI to sort out who's paying for that additional cost. I don't know that I would recommend we get involved in determining
Yep.
that.
Further questions? Is there a motion on the request for waiver,
I would move alternative one.
Second.
which is just for
Approve the fireworks permit for the festival, but require the insurance limits as indicated in municipal code.
which is the 5 million. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
then I would follow this up. I would move that we would ask staff to work with the organizers to see if there's an alternative source to cover this $1,200. And I'm worried a little bit about the timing of this. We would have another meeting prior to Ragbri, right?
Two.
We've got-
2 meetings.
Two, we have 11
Yeah.
nominations.
And so, and then report back to council what they were able to find.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So I'm not going to support the motion because it sounds like staff would recommend that the city would stay out of the negotiations and leave that between the band and the organizers.
Any discussion?
I think that's a reasonable posture to take. But we're inviting the state of Iowa to our house. And this seems like a very modest amount of money. The city of Ames will be benefiting tremendously by all these people coming to Ames. So it's a relatively small amount. If it turns out we have to pay it, I'm willing to suggest that comes out of a council contingency. But at the very least, we can help facilitate a discussion to see if there's funding available.
Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right. On item number 38, discussion on property maintenance code.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am the Fire Chief, Rich Higgins, and alongside me is our city's building official, Sarah Van Meeteren. And we're back again. We just spent last Tuesday with you. Take this opportunity just to remind listeners and council, we started this process back in August 2020, when council made a motion requesting a memo from staff on how to address property maintenance issues throughout our community. We returned to council on May 25th, 2021 with a rough draft proposal and presented that to council. We then took that proposal, put it out. We used press releases. We reached out to Home Builders Association, landlords, Board of Realtors, neighborhood associations. We also included a survey that was out to public and had over 200 responses on the proposed ordinance. We then met again with council and did a workshop in June 15th of 2021 and listened to over 20 comments from the public. We then took all those comments from the public and incorporated them into a new proposal that we shared with you guys last week on June 20th, 2023. The proposed ordinance, we now have it in ordinance format, and there's a few things that Sarah's going to highlight for you with the ordinance, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. So as a general, just generally speaking, most of the ordinance encompasses all of the motions you made last time. There is one small minor change that we made. We just thought it made more sense. It is number 8 in the proposed ordinance, the vegetation in the right-of-way. We created a 1-foot buffer along the street for vehicle access, use. In that area, vegetation needed to be under 12 inches. We have put in an exception that is not necessary if it is designated as no parking. So the intent is to allow you to open your door. If it's not allowed to be parked adjacent to that area, then there's no reason for the buffer. So we just created an exception for that. And then there are a couple of concerns that came up. I know we talked about the height of vegetation over the sidewalk. We had initially proposed 10 feet over the sidewalk. Citizens wanted 8 feet. We talked about this at the workshop quite a bit. We are still recommending the 10-foot DOT requirement. In talking with Public Works, they have some pretty major concerns about being able to maintain that. They said there's some projects that we have to maintain compliance with for over 20 years. So changing that down to 8 would be in violation of that. So we're recommending the 10-foot. And then additionally, the abatement tool that we were requesting, in speaking with the legal department, it sounds like we would still need to go to court to get a warrant to initiate that. So we can't just put in our ordinance that we have the right to go on the property and take someone's possessions. We still need to get a warrant to it. So It will slow down the process a little bit, but it allows the court to be part of the process and isn't just staff making that decision. So the judge would have to rule on whether or not we had the right to do that. So those are the three major changes. I'm open to any questions.
Questions?
Mayor, I was the one fighting for this 8-foot amount, and I feel like I'm fighting too hard on this now. So I still am baffled that the federal government cares about these things, but sometimes you have to pick your battles. Would it be appropriate for me to make a motion to change this to 10 feet just to resolve this?
Is that similar enough that we could still proceed with the first reading?
First reading won't be till next time.
Okay.
This is just if you're going to give approval to take this into and bring it back as ordinance and have the first reading next meeting. Yep.
And I will say that we already put that into the ordinance. It's written at 10 now, or did we? It's at 8. Okay, so we do need a motion to change it. Sorry.
So could I do that now, Mayor?
So my question would be, do we need to have two motions? One to reconsider the past motion and then the new motion?
Was it a motion that?
There was a motion and it failed. Motion for 10 feet failed. So now it sounds like Tim, who is on the winning side,
Okay.
is
Yep.
asking for reconsideration.
Yep.
Okay, so can someone remind me what the motion was at the workshop? Because I was there, but I don't
The
remember.
original motion was for 10 feet, and
Okay.
Bronwyn and I voted in favor, and the other four voted against.
No,
Wasn't it?
no, the
No.
first motion was just Tim.
Oh, it was 8.
Yeah, 8 feet over sidewalks, and that passed 4-2, according to what I have.
Oh, okay. So,
I honestly think that in this situation, we had a workshop where you were just giving direction to staff on, this is the stuff we'd like to see in it. Now we've actually got a draft in front of you that you're considering. So I think you can just go ahead and make a motion. You don't need to reconsider the motion from last time, because that was sort of a meeting with a different purpose to it than this one. And so this one is to fine tune the ordinance before we bring it back for first reading. So I don't think there's a need to reconsider the motion from last time.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Good question. Sarah, is that in, I did see the 8 feet. Which item number is that?
It's number 9 in the draft ordinance that you have.
So a motion would be in order to amend item number 9 from 8 feet to 10 feet, correct?
Correct.
Tim?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. So I have some hesitations about the timing in which this is going to be coming back to the council for public input and first reading on July 11th. And I appreciate, Chief, the lengths that you have gone through to receive public input in this process. This has been a multi-year effort. But I question whether the public truly understands the magnitude of this ordinance. I am supportive of the ordinance. I would like to see the ordinance. But this is going to affect every homeowner in Ames. And I worry that such a compressed time frame will give us a chance to get the word out. Now, the challenge is, how do we get the word out? And this has been a major struggle. And hopefully with our media here, they can be of assistance with this effort. And we have our other social media. But it seems like this is a fairly compressed schedule given the magnitude of these changes. Could you give us a little more of your thoughts in terms of why the staff is recommending this coming back on July 11th?
Yeah, I think it's just to keep the process moving, to keep it before you, to keep it before the community with the things that we're seeing. We've seen an uptick. We currently do not have a community codes liaison. We are in the recruitment process for that position. And we're just seeing quite a few calls throughout the community. So awareness right now is rather high. So we're taking this opportunity to make sure that we're presenting it before council. And we've tried multiple outreach efforts. In fact, for this meeting, we did a press release. For the workshop, we did a press release as well. We work really hard to solicit as much feedback from our customers, because that's what we really did. When we had the June 15th, 2021 workshop, it was taking all of the customers' feedback and blending that into an ordinance that was going to work for a majority of the people that were here to comment, the 200 comments and the 20 plus people that were here to speak, trying to make something that was workable for people, not overburdensome, but also workable and respectful for both the neighbor and the individual working through the issue that they had with their property. So we're always ears if there's other opportunities to reach out to the public. Where our ears are always on, trying to listen and take that customer feedback. 'Cause that's how we're driven to make decisions, is through that customer feedback. And we really feel like the ordinance we have tonight before you is a great blend of all that feedback from council and from our customers as well.
And there'll always be people who say they didn't know this was happening. So I'll spot us that's always a possibility. But I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into that decision of the timing. And the final thing, I tried to raise the issue unsuccessfully in our last workshop about the situation with motorhomes, RVs. And if the public express concern that in this property maintenance code, there was no effort to address even a modicum of providing some common sense regulation, some limitations, would people still be able to present those concerns at the July 11th meeting?
Well, yes, because our policy is that when we have the first reading of an ordinance, we always invite public comment. I'll often open public comment here after council. We've gotten emails from people expressing their opinion. 2 weeks from now, there'll be more public comment. After that, no, because second and third reading, we historically do not, unless council makes a major change to the ordinance.
Well, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that process was clear. I spent some time driving around the community, and there are some neighborhoods that sort of have a feel of an RV park. And I worry again that we wouldn't allow construction of properties of that size in those spaces, and yet someone can park a vehicle that takes up the same amount of space in those areas. And it's hard for neighbors, if they feel awkward, to raise a concern about a huge RV that's parked next to their home. They look at this every time they leave and every time they come back. No question, it impacts their property value. And so it's awkward for people to raise those concerns. And so this is a space that we've created to give people a voice for that. So I'm hoping that our media outlets will convey that there's still opportunities to speak to that. Thanks.
Mayor, I will be missing the July 11th meeting. So if there is a desire for the entire council to be on record for this, I would request that we move it to the July 25th meeting.
25th is.
Oh, that's the right thing. So the 18th.
Yeah.
I forgot. It's not just a work.
Okay. We'll take that in consideration.
I do have just a couple questions, and the first one might be, it's just because we've always done it that way. So the $500 and the $750 for penalties, is that, how was that arrived at?
So that's the violation penalty for most violations in the municipal code right now. So many of them start at 500, then they go to 750, and then 1,000 for every subsequent offense. The municipal code does say a municipal infraction citation. I think it starts at $50 unless otherwise stated, but many of the codes that we condensed into this version were under the $500 fee section. So we just kept that.
Okay. And then some of these I wondered, so 7 and 17, section 30.5. So the depositing of ice or snow, I think we talked about that being a little bit more finely designated, that was sort of trucks and things that pile the snow up, not the person with their snow blower or their shovel. And so I just, that one and 17, oh yeah, so 7, that was the concern there. Just that we would be sure with that one and the one with the water, thinking about what's that mean? So that people aren't thinking that necessarily that if they have a puddle in their backyard, is that the same as having, I just want to find a way not to make some of these things so subjective and to make it clearer when folks have gotten to a point of violation.
Was that number 4 you were talking about, Anita, with the water?
The water is 4, and then depositing the ice or snow from your property was 7. And I thought with both of those, there was some discussion about what do we mean about the size and the scope of some of these, so that it's not, because I thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this was about public safety as well. And that's the primary reason that we're visiting these.
Mm-hmm.
And so making it clear that it's not somehow it rained and you ended up with a puddle in your backyard and now you're a neighbor saw it and they don't like you. And so this now becomes an issue. And I don't think you want those calls. And so trying to find a way to be a little more precise in those would, and I don't know how others feel, but that's.
So I think we thought that the definition of stagnant water that was created helped clarify. So in the definition section, we do now define that. And based on the workshop last time, we made sure that stormwater retention areas was added in that definition, so they're not included. I don't know if that helps clarify.
Maybe, I don't know.
Do you have a proposed change?
Proposed change, I'm thinking more it's like a size or a depth or something, but I'm not quite sure what to put there. So
I like the concern that you're raising for any number of these. So a lot of this is in the enforcement. And I just think we should presume that this isn't perfect and that over time we'll kick the tires on this and there'll be amendments that are needed. I think it's good to ask the question. I feel comfortable with the language as it is, and we'll sort of see how it goes with enforcement. I trust these guys will give feedback to the council if something's not working in practice.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think number 7, the thing that makes me more comfortable with that is the language about obstructing gutters or impeding the passage of vehicles upon the street. That, to me, that doesn't say somebody with their snow blower. That says large amounts of snow that are being moved and that are blocking the
and maybe I
way.
have had a few comments and they read it the other way. And so I do, and that's why I'm kind of raising that to make sure that we clarify. And
it's good.
Similarly
So is there
with
other proposed changes, Anita, or are you just bringing that up as a comment?
bring it up as a comment at this point. Yeah, I don't have any proposed language changes. And similarly with section 17, comments about that some of that appears subjective to like free of holes. Well, what size holes and paint? And I know that you showed us samples of things, but again, for clarity for those homeowners, I don't have specific changes. It's more of a general comment.
Sarah, maybe Sarah, you could explain the process, what you would go through. This is, first of all, complaint driven, right?
Correct.
We're not going to be driving around, or every fire truck's not going to be looking, just checking every building and just, taking notes. And I think that there's a a modicum of discretion that you would use if you knew that someone's trying to basically be vindictive or trying to, pick on someone's, but just walk through how you would proceed. Maybe that would give some people some comfort that this is not basically a vendetta to go through and cite everyone in the entire city of Ames.
Sure. So regarding subsection 17, this really is to help us maintain existing properties that we have. So we don't have anything to enforce currently prior to them being declared a dangerous structure. At that point, there's major holes, there's water intrusion, critter intrusion. We want to be able to do something before it gets to that point. So if we see a structure that has several holes, openings, paint that's peeling off so much that the wood that's exposed is going to deteriorate, that's what we're keeping in mind when we're looking for violations. So if somebody sends us an email and says there's a small hole, we're not going to be up there with a magnifying glass looking for a small, let's say a woodpecker hole, and say, now you've got to reside your whole house. That's not the intent of it. And I think through education, when we explain that to people, most people are pretty understanding, actually. I mean, it can be expensive and people do fight it, but the goal is to keep them in their properties and keep their properties safe. So regarding the others, I think the same thing. As the mayor said, it's complaint driven. So for example, the pushing of snow onto the street, that was something Public Works wanted. So when they had major issues that were costing them money because they had to go back and replow the area, they could use it to talk with the owner. Same with stagnant water. Again, it's going to take a couple days for somebody to complain. We'll go out, take a look at it, and then be able to talk with the owner about what this is causing and identify solutions with them.
My observation is on the snow, I think a lot of commercial snow removal companies come in after the fact in residential areas. They clear it and they have mounds of snow across the street from a driveway. And so they're going to need to be the ones that are, I see at least in neighborhoods I've been around and I live in, it's not the individuals, it's primarily the commercial. So they'll have to be put on notice that you got to get that, out of the curb essentially.
Sarah, number 18 about graffiti, I thought there was going to be a clause in there about not having the permission of the property owner.
That is in the definition of graffiti.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All
So
right,
we tried to add a lot more into the definitions so we didn't have to put so much in the content of the code. So some of the definitions have more exceptions in them than you might normally see. Like junked vehicle has several different subsections within the definition, which is kind of odd, but that's exactly what the code says now.
Any other questions? All right, open up public comment. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Any closing comments? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
Move alternative one.
Second.
Okay. That would be, of course, with the one change on the from 8 foot to 10 foot.
So that's alternative 2, isn't it?
Oh, I get to it.
Yeah,
I mean, really,
revise it.
Thank you.
just to make sure.
And are we,
To revise and send back.
Yeah, and let me do a quick poll. Will everyone be present on the 18th? July 18th?
As far as I'm aware.
Okay, I entertain a motion on, as you said, Rowan, alternative 2 with putting on the July 18th meeting. Is there a motion?
I would move that we direct staff to change the clearance above sidewalks to 10 feet and then bring back the ordinance for comment and first reading on July 18th.
Thank you.
second,
And I had a motion on the floor. I will withdraw that motion just for.
I think it
procedural
was, only was
purposes.
seconded.
I
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
but-
it
Oh,
was-
you- I'm sorry.
seconded.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay, but
My apologies.
that's all right. We just pulled it off.
Got rusty after a couple of weeks.
Right.
Okay, those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
All right, move on to item number 39, staff report on ADUs and duplex draft standards.
That item went really fast. We weren't quite ready. I was here last week. It did go so fast. So tonight we're talking about ADUs and duplexes. We gave you a staff report as follow-up from an April meeting where we introduced some concepts that council endorsed moving forward with for actual zoning text amendments. And what we've prepared for you in the attachment is essentially the bulleted standards that would apply to both, well, individually to ADUs and to duplexes. We have a presentation we emailed out to you yesterday that we're going to walk through some of the highlights to kind of illustrate what the intent is behind of those things. There's a couple of questions or comments we had in the staff report just to confirm that we're moving ahead as directed in April. One of the key things was the description of new construction only. And as we understood that from April, it was to be a detached individual ADU that was going to be allowed. We did interpret that if you were converting an existing detached accessory building and converting that into a new livable unit, that met the intent of the new construction. But additions and conversions of houses were not new construction in the eyes of what I think we were talking about in April. And then for duplexes, the same thing. New construction was interpreted to mean literally new construction. You had to be building on a vacant lot or replacing something that was on that property. So if that was not the intent of what we described in April, then some changes would need to be done to the attachments. But it's written right now to think of all of that as new construction as described. I think the other thing of note, we did notice a couple of inconsistencies in some of the language. We believe the attachments are correct. So whatever was described in the attachments, if you found any conflicting description or something that didn't seem the same in the staff report body, the attachment is the key thing. And one of those things, there was a statement that said rear setbacks of 20 feet would still apply in relation to two-story ADUs. That statement doesn't actually make sense on its own. What we want to clarify is in the attachment, a two-story ADU actually has to meet side setbacks of 8 feet, but it actually is allowed to be a 3-foot setback on the rear yard. So the way we have detached structures written within our code now, 2-story applies to the side, 3 always applies to the rear, whether it's 1 or 2 stories. And as the direction was given to us in April, we were going to follow the current accessory building standards, no extra relief to ADUs, just follow them as they are. So if you found a little inconsistency in the body of the report versus the attachment, I just want to clarify it currently is written to allow for a 3-foot setback in the rear yard. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eloise. We're going to go through those slides. They're illustrating the principles, and then if there's any questions or comments on the actual standards, we'll get that from the council tonight.
So this presentation highlights the most important things to be discussed. It's not showing every item. This just summarizes the timeline we've been on. So with ADUs, we understand it to be new construction of ADUs, meaning a standalone independent detached unit, or it could be an existing garage that has a second floor added. Or could be a new detached garage with an accessory dwelling unit as well. So either of those. But we are not including in the materials any addition to the house or any division of the existing house into an attached ADU. So as mentioned, the direction was to treat accessory dwelling units similar to other accessory structures, accessory buildings, And so this shows the 3-foot setback that's allowed to the rear or side yard in the rear yard of dwelling. And so these are the areas that you could put a 1-story detached ADU. It can be within 3 feet of the side and 3 feet of the rear property line. It also has to not cover more than 25% of the rear yard. 2-story would be 3 feet from the rear property line and 8 feet from the side property line to the rear of the house. The ADU cannot exceed 80% of the principal height of the principal building height, or a maximum of 20 feet. So that regulates the height as well as the location. A foundation would be required. So this structure here that's shown on wheels would not be allowed. We are not saying you could not have a pre-manufactured unit to be used for an ADU. But if you were to have a pre-manufactured unit, you would need to have it on a foundation, permanent foundation. These are some examples of 1-bedroom floor plans, and we have followed the direction that you gave for 1-bedroom being the maximum. So with duplexes, the direction being new construction would mean that the only way to establish a duplex within an existing neighborhood would be with a vacant lot. So a demolition of a building perhaps, and to make way for a duplex. So this is going to walk you through a little bit of what we're calling the garage driveway pattern. So as mentioned in the staff report, when you look at the patterns of existing neighborhoods in Ames, there's 3 patterns that show up regularly. And so this first pattern, it basically has the garage front loaded at the front of the house, but the garage is either flush or nearly flush with the front of the building. And so to replicate that, we would require the garage to not protrude from the front of the house. We would also require that there not be more than a single car garage for each duplex, each side of the duplex, each unit. And also the driveway would just be a single car width driveway. Here's some floor plans that show that it can be built. Common practice for newer construction is to have a protruding garage, which doesn't fit these existing neighborhoods for the most part, the older existing neighborhoods. The second pattern is a driveway that extends along the side of the house to a detached or rear garage. So one thing that's interesting in Ames is that, if I go back to this pattern, in many cases, a house maybe was built without a garage, but there was room for a garage. And so a garage has been added to the front, whereas initially there probably was no garage in that pattern. But this actually is the predominant pattern, even in the existing neighborhoods. But it may have been more like this at one time. So also wanted to note that the entrances here on this duplex are both delineated to separated, but also given attention. So as individual units facing the street. And here are some floor plans supporting that pattern.
Eloise, on that rear garage,
Yes.
if someone were to say, oh, I want to put a second story on my garage that looks like this with that one-story house, that would not be allowed because of the mass?
Right.
More than 80%?
Right, because of the accessory, that's in the accessory buildings, that your accessory buildings cannot be higher than 80% of the principal building.
Thank you.
You bet. So this is the pattern with the alley loaded garage. So oftentimes you don't even see the garage from the front of the house. There again, this is a duplex with an alley loaded garage, but also the individual entrances are highlighted. This would be considered incompatible and not allowed for the duplexes that are infill. As you can see, can't really see where the entrance is set back. There's 4 garages. We would allow 1 garage per unit, so a total of 2, and also the width of the driveway. And although there's many parts of the city with this pattern, if you're trying to put this into established neighborhood that has one of the pictures that we showed previously, then this really would not fit. It would not be compatible. Another idea we wanted to put out there was the idea of window alignment. And in most cases, it's not an issue, but sometimes we see something coming in that looks like a train wreck of windows, where the windows aren't balanced, they don't align, they have no relationship on the front facade to one another. They may have different sizes and so forth. So by adding this in, it allows for discussion when somebody would propose something that would be it would not be compatible with the neighborhood. So next steps, public outreach across the city. We're planning to put together a web page with online resources, frequently asked questions, information on the draft that you would support for discussion with the public. And then we're looking to have in-person public meetings across the city and to reach out to particularly neighborhood associations, and then to return to City Council in October with the results of the public outreach. Whoops. So maybe the best thing at this point would be to see if you have questions on the attachment, the specific standards. I can pull those up if you'd like.
I'm mostly just curious about that window thing. Is asymmetry really never desirable in design?
Well, the intent was not to say it could not be asymmetrical, but the intent is to have it balanced. And so like we actually looked at pictures of some of the units, and there might be 2 windows on the second floor with 1 window below it. It's balanced. But in this case, or in some of the cases where it's, there's no continuity of window size or placement, and the placement is just enough off, we would like to help guide that a little bit if it were to come up.
I think this is not an egregious example of it, so it might not register with you as that bad. And we talked about this a little bit when Eloise put it together, but we have seen projects, because we have no window, or really we have no design guidelines for any residential structure in the city right now. So we have seen 2-story structures where they're all designed around stairwells and bathrooms, and it doesn't look like a living space is being created, because maybe it's at the back of the structure and they put stairwells at the front and closed off walls for closets, where it doesn't look like a house that you've customarily would see in that residential area. So that's what we're trying to get at, is to think about your floor plan as it externally relates to your neighbors, as much as you just have tunnel vision about, well, I need a walk-in closet, I need a bathroom, and I need this as my bedroom. So that's what we're trying to get to. How that gets through the public comment and what we see as the actual standards, I think we'll see how that goes if you're going to entertain that being part of the design guidelines.
Could you recap a little bit about the letter of compliance and the rental regulations for ADUs, just for the public?
Right. So the concept that we're moving ahead with is that if you are permitted to build an ADU, one of the two units must be owner occupied. And so there's a definition of an owner in the rental code. We would use that similar concept. It has to be your primary residence. It can't just be, I'm there one weekend out of the year or something like that. So it's important to focus on that one must be owner occupied, because there's a difference between saying it's two licensed rentals, because you don't necessarily have to license everything that's a rental if it's related to family or some other options that exist in the rental code. So one of the two, either the large unit or the small unit, has to be owner occupied. What we intend to do is, before that building permit is issued for the ADU, you'll have to record a document for the property that basically states you understand the limitations on the use of this property is to have one rental certificate and that one unit must be owner occupied. And then we'll have a companion adjustment in the rental code to make it clear that only one letter of compliance could be issued for that registered property. So we hope we get it on both ends, that there's disclosure at the beginning, and then as staff administers the rental code over time, only one would be issued for that.
Is that the case with the duplexes too?
No, duplexes will be allowed to have two. It could be either one owner occupied, one rented, both occupied, or both rented.
Other questions? All right. Staff's looking for direction. Should they proceed as proposed and on the schedule they're talking about?
Is there,
We need a motion to that effect?
Yes. Good.
I would move that we proceed as proposed in the council action form.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And given the fact that there's going to be a significant amount of opportunity for online feedback, public comment being sought, or public comment and public outreach, we'll let that serve as the opportunity for people to give feedback on this. We want to just get the ball rolling.
Yeah, so when we come back, it's not even going to be a draft ordinance at that point. We're going to give you the feedback, a lot like the property maintenance code, see what adjustments you want to make, and then we'll proceed into the ordinance adoption process.
Okay. All right. Item 40, staff report on Savage Gymnastics.
Benjamin Campbell's going to present that item.
Good evening. The Savage Gymnastics Academy contacted City Council recently about finding a new home for their facility. They had been using Iowa State facilities, but were recently asked to leave those. The Academy has been looking for a new location and recently found a building that meets their requirements in the General Industrial Zoning District on East Lincoln Way. The General Industrial Zoning District, however, does not allow for health clubs and gyms or for sports practice facilities. And staff met with the applicant and reviewed the use and determined that this would fall under the category of a sports practice facility. A gymnastics academy does have some unique requirements, including ceiling height and an open floor plan of sufficient size. The applicant reviewed available properties throughout the city and was unable to find anything available in a zoning district that does allow for a sports practice facility. In order for the applicant to use this specific property on East Lincoln Way, staff identified several options. The first was to change the allowable uses in GI to allow for a sports practice facility. The second is to create a special use permit process for GI. So if an applicant came forward with an application for a specific use, it would be reviewed by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The third would be to rezone the property. It is surrounded by GI in all directions for quite a ways. HOC is a zoning district that would allow for a sports practice facility, and the future land use plan in Ames Plan 2040 does call for a change in use of this corridor here. The intent was that we would create a new zoning district for this area. That is time consuming, and the applicant is looking to find a new space in a faster time period than that. Staff does recommend that the SUP process would be the way that the best option of those three. That would give a measure of protection for the industrial land. GI is the largest industrial zoning district, and I think there are legitimate economic reasons, for instance, to want to protect that land for industrial uses and not see it whittled away for other things.
Thank you. Questions?
I just have two questions, I think. One is, do you mean that the special use permit would be something someone could apply for any special use, or just sports practice facility?
Just for sports practice facility.
Thank you, just checking. And then if we did go ahead with option 2 to allow that sports practice facility through a special use permit, and say hypothetically Savage Gymnastics got the location they want, and then we rezone it in the future to match the Ames Plan 2040 plan for it, so that sort of HOC cousin, would that still allow them to use, like, I just don't want them to be at a point then where we rezone it to something then and it kicks them out again. Is that, or do you think the new zoning that we would lay down for the rest of the neighboring properties there would be?
The SUP would still stand even with a zoning district change. We wouldn't.
So
yeah.
At worst, they would become non-conforming if you didn't allow for that use in a new zoning district, which means they can continue to be there
anyway
in perpetuity until it stops being what it is.
Okay.
Just thinking through what I think our intent is for this area, I would be surprised if we didn't allow for that type of use, because we're trying to mix commercial with light industrial uses along this corridor, which would open up this option.
Okay, so it'd probably be compatible with future.
Yeah. I think part of that rationale, when you see in our comments, we're not really opposed to the proposal at this location.
Yes.
Because our comp plan says we wanted to evaluate migrating towards different uses in this area.
Prairie View, like maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Other questions?
Do we have any other examples of where gymnasiums are in an industrial area? I don't know if any of the CrossFits, they tend to sort of find sort of an industrial space. Do we have any other examples of this?
Yeah, a couple of different ways. So CrossFit's uniquely classified. So we do have one. The ones that are in industrial areas, you might not even know those are industrial areas. There's one out on East 13th Street. That's technically industrial next to Manats, but there's a CrossFit there. ZBA has approved that use as a version of retail and personal services, not as a health club. So a true health club like Planet Fitness is not permitted in industrial, but for some reason our categories address these like class-based things a little bit differently. But then on the broader question of like sports practice facilities, in Ames, you wouldn't see that because we've precluded that. You do see it on occasion in other cities. So like in Des Moines, at the very north end of Des Moines, there's a basketball facility that's in an industrial area. It's a conversion of an old industrial building. So I think these sports practice facilities try to find cheap space with high ceilings because it's expensive to build. So that only exists typically in industrial. So on occasion, you will see it in other places. It kind of depends on the city. Some do, some don't.
Okay, thank you.
So Kelly, if we were to rezone this to HOC, what are the implications for the future, since HOC fits with the GC idea for that in the plan, is it likely that we would have other property owners interested in rezoning?
I don't know if we weren't talking about a specific request. What staff would be proposing is that we go do a mailer and make ourselves available to that general area to hear property owners' interests. What uses are they concerned about existing? What interests are they like to have, and see if there's a balance there, and we would intend to rezone multiple properties, not just one at a time. I think the unique part here is it's a request for one property, and HOC is the only thing that sort of reflects what the comp plan is going for in the future. It probably gets all rezoned to something different in the future.
Any other questions? You talk about timeline, if for the different options, how long it would take for, let's just say, for special use permit to be allowed and steps that council needs to go through.
So either option 1 or 2 is a text amendment. So that would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then back to council. In all likelihood, it would be, I know it would be a P&Z meeting in July, but based on your other schedules of things that are going on, I don't think you would see the text amendment until your first meeting in August. And at that point, that would be first reading. And then you would have to decide if you were interested in waiving any rules to get it done on that first opportunity that you see it that night. The ZBA, if you went with number 1, that'd be it. You'd be done. They would proceed to building permits if it's a permitted use. Option 2, we can't hold the ZBA hearing for the special use permit until the ordinance has been approved and been published. So possibly 2 weeks of separation between when you're done with it and going to ZBA. We would take the application. We'd be all prepared to go, presuming council would approve the ordinance, but it's probably a 2-week delay from whenever you act and it's published to be able to go to ZBA. I think we've done that one other time where we were waiting for an action at council and we stacked up a council approval. And then immediately that next week we had a ZBA approval after that. So that would be that situation. If you go to HOC, that's not a text amendment. That's a property rezoning. You'd really be saying that the property owner can apply for it. You yourselves are not taking any direct action. They are applying for it. They go to P&Z and then come back to you. But it's on the owner to apply for that.
I like that question a great deal. I didn't consider that when I read this, so I appreciate that, Mayor. So could you finish it, though, your answer with option 3, assuming the owner applies right away, then how soon could we see it?
It'd be almost the same as the text amendment. It would be the same process, has to go to a public hearing at the commission, then a public hearing with you. That probably lands on that first meeting in August just as the same. That's the likely schedule. And then it's approved, or the same question, do you waive rules and condense the readings? And once it's published, it's effective, the building permit can be issued. So 1 and 3 are similar in terms of the overall time. Option 2 is probably 2 more weeks in terms of time than any of those other 2 options.
And is there any way to expedite this? Do we have any flexibility if we wanted to go faster?
Not sure that you could get it to the July 18th meeting. If you had your July 25th meeting, I'd say that's where it would end up. I don't know that we can get it to the July 18th meeting because you had to move your meeting up.
Can we do a special meeting?
That's up to the council.
But we could, though. That would be
I believe
an option.
I believe you.
It's on the 12th, so it would depend on how long we need after that.
It would go to the planning commission that it goes to first, not the board of adjustment.
When does P&Z meet?
I don't know that we have a quorum for July 5th, so July 19th is that next meeting.
And maybe the applicant could address the councils in terms of what their sense of timing is. I don't know if they, how
Well, I
fast
think
they
that
need
their communication that's included in the packet indicated there was, they're trying to accelerate it. But the point is that they're also made aware of the fact that we have a process we need to go through, and it takes time, and we have to hit certain meetings that are scheduled.
You ready for a motion?
No, just give me a second for an answer, and I'll probably open public comment, see if anyone wants to comment on that first.
So I'm just following up on the question of special meetings. Mark and I in the past had talked about whether rezoning can be on a special meeting. We both believe the code says it has to be on a regular meeting.
Okay.
So I think you're stuck with
August 8th.
August or the 18th, but I'm not sure I can get to the 18th of July.
Oh, we got either the 18th or it'd be August 8th.
August 8th for sure. We could make that.
Okay, all right. Well, public comment. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? If you would state your name and you may begin.
Good evening. I'm Joanne Barton, and I am assisting Savage Gymnastics Academy on a pro bono basis in order to assist the 150 kids that are really interested in continuing with their gymnastics programming. First of all, I want to say thank you to the council for really taking this seriously, for the loss of this enriching programming, especially for the kids that are in the adaptive programming that they can't, to our knowledge, can't get anywhere else in the state. If we don't move forward with this, then they go backwards in their mobility. And also to the kids that are on team, the Junior Olympic team, they start competition in November. And they have not had 2 months of practice. They have flight skills that become dangerous if they don't have regular practice. And so pushing this as fast as possible is really great. The owners themselves, when we talked with the owners and also with Savage Gymnastics, I've talked with the Mossmans and the Savix folks. Savage is okay with 1 and 2. They would prefer 1, of course, because it is a little bit faster. The problem with 3 is the owner doesn't want it and has expressed that they don't want me to pursue that route. So that is somewhat limiting for, even though I think it does take care of many of the issues that are going to start coming up in the future due to the lack of available sites in the community for this type of use. So just be aware of that. And then the idea of pushing it forward, I know you're trying as fast as possible. It will take them at least 2 weeks to a month to get the facility up to speed. So we're already, if we looking at August 5th, and then 2 weeks later, you're looking at right before school starts. And then it will probably be the middle of September before they're going to be able to get into the facility appropriately, get that parking situation. I think that the staff has said that they will assist on finding the old parking plan because there are no lines currently for the area. And so in that regard, obviously option 1 is the most expedient. It isn't as pretty or as tightly narrowed as option 2. And I do understand why staff is asking for option 2. In the location they currently are looking on East Lincoln Way, daycare facilities are currently allowed without asking for a special use permit. And so do keep that in mind that, yes, it is different than what is normally there, but daycare facilities as well as high school and vocational technical schools are allowed without having to go through this process. So I will be out of state from July 17th to August 5th. So for my purposes, in order to apply for anything, I do want to get that paperwork on file with you as soon as possible so that we can get that meeting, and hopefully I can be available I probably won't make it to the early August meeting, and so I will need a little bit of help shepherding it through while I'm gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Any closing questions or comments?
So Kelly, you asked Mark about the special meeting. that applies to all three of these options, that it's not an option to do a special meeting? Or would it be an option for number one, which is changing the permitted uses?
Honestly, I think it applies to all because I think they're all technically rezoning ordinances, whether it's text or property map amendments. But I don't have the code provision in front of me that we both, I know this came up last year and I was told I can't do it on a workshop. So that's why we both know that's true. So I think it applies to all three.
Is there a motion?
I'd move option 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
So why option 2 instead of option 1?
Well, because while I certainly understand the need for speed on this one, I think option 2 is a good compromise. It's not going to make or break it. I mean, it's maybe a little less desirable for the applicant, but it's not the end of the world for the applicant. And they thought it was an okay option. And I like that it gives some safeguards that staff felt were important while still achieving the request of the applicant. So it's a compromise.
Could you flesh out just a bit? I don't understand the compromise. Like what?
Oh, well, I guess that there would be some safeguard in place to look at each request as it came through on a case-by-case basis, rather than just a blanket approval for any type of sports practice facility that might want to go into a GI zone, which, you know, maybe there's not much risk there, but again, the special use permit would allow a mechanism to look at each one of those as they are proposed.
And Kelly, could you go back to John's question, the timing between option 1 and option 2?
I would add 2, possibly up to 2 weeks to the end of whenever council approves the third reading of the ordinance. It would just kind of depend on how the date fell. The issue is we have to notice for ZBA. It's probably 2 weeks at least, actually, because we have to notice for ZBA almost 2 weeks before the meeting. I don't think we would notice something that isn't allowed to be approved yet until this council has approved an ordinance. No. So at least 2 weeks is what I would say.
2 weeks, what?
After council approves it.
2 weeks. 2 weeks longer.
Longer, yes.
2 is 2 weeks longer.
Yes. So like if I'm just looking at the calendar, so we would do ZBA would be scheduled for August 23rd as a standing meeting. So if you approve the ordinance on the 8th, we would be able to publish notice on the 9th for the 23rd. So it would be 2 weeks in August.
So what, is it possible to have planning and zoning on the 12th and by the 18th have the ordinance or it says a text amendment, right? Ready for council, and if they essentially suspended the rules and had all 3 readings in one evening, then you could still notice.
I can't say I can or can't because I haven't asked them if they're available for any particular meeting other than July 5th.
Got it. Understand.
So I couldn't
For P&Z.
promise. Yeah, I just can't promise anything.
Understand.
I gotta say 2 weeks though, in the grand scheme of municipal action is like so fast.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Move
So
on.
just to be clear, the motion was then to initiate a text amendment to allow for a special use permit for sports practice facilities. So
Your option 2.
Staff is initiating it, correct?
Your option 2.
Or is it? No, I'm sorry. We wrote that as applicant, right?
It's
Just want to make sure we know what we said.
The applicant to apply.
Yep. Okay. So that allows them to apply for it. That means that they really do have the lease. They're really going to move forward with the project. We're just not going to do it. So that'll allow for them to apply for it, and then we'll proceed through the hearings.
So you can talk to Ms. Barden and coordinate
Absolutely.
that, what you need to get done, and get things queued up then.
Yep. So she knows some next steps we were holding off on tonight to make sure we were going ahead, and then she has some things lined up that she wants to get going.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Item 41, response to Story County Comprehensive Plan.
So tonight I'm asking for you to endorse sending some public comment to the Board of Supervisors. Much like us, when the Ames Fringe Plan expired or I should say the 28E agreement expired and the old Fringe Plan was no longer in force for Story County for Ames, they went back to their comp plan and looked at how did that work within their comp plan. We did a similar thing at the beginning of May when we were making our adjustments to Plan 2040. And altered some language to reflect that the fringe plan related to growth areas and urban reserves, how that was going to work without a fringe plan. So the county had a meeting later in May after we acted and gave some direction to staff to change their comp plan to include some of the provisions that we had talked about within the fringe plan update. And some of them are a little bit different. So as I understand it, the board had looked at areas north of 190th Street and to the southwest as staying ag and farm services, but then areas to the south of Ames and to the east of Ames using our growth areas and our urban reserve to map a designation that they have called urban expansion. Now that category already exists in their comp plan. It's applied to other cities in the county. They just didn't use it for us because we had a fringe plan. So what caught my attention with that was that some of a specific policy in their comp plan seems to support the idea of allowing for rezoning in the county to allow for development without it being annexed to the city. And as you know, we only have subdivision authority within 2 miles. So if it was for a commercial and an industrial site where you may not need to divide the property, the county could be allowing for development to occur right next to the city in these commercial industrials. It will not impact residential because residential would need a subdivision, and that brings us back into the picture. So the letter I'm asking to have sent has two main purposes. One, to make it very clear our intent with urban growth and urban reserve was not to indicate we were expecting development to occur in these areas outside of the city. It was really to plan for the orderly growth of the city, not just to have development that may someday be like city development. Make that clear that we're not supporting that at all. Secondly, we do have a suggestion at the end that this issue kind of highlights one of those things that just didn't work between the two parties the last time we talked, which was urban reserve has two completely different meanings from the county's perspective versus the city's. So there is a second idea at the end of the letter saying maybe as to move forward with a different concept of a 2080 agreement that's more simplified than what had been talked about over the past year, more focused on just narrowly talking about subdivision authority and possibly having limitations on rezonings, something that's more simple than the kind of more comprehensive approach we had worked on before. The main emphasis, though, is to be clear that we don't support the idea of using that urban expansion designation to facilitate rural development. And that's my number one comment and goal to be articulated back to the Board of Supervisors. And so I'm looking for council to endorse that communication, have it be signed by the mayor, and then we would transmit it to them. I believe their schedule is in July. They would start hearings with their Planning and Zoning Commission, and I don't even know what date it would go to the supervisors, but we would provide that letter to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to the supervisors.
Questions, comments?
Kelly, this is pretty abstract stuff. Could you help us can you give us an example of developments that would be impacted by the county's position and by our position, just to give us something concrete?
Well, I think the most obvious area that this would probably come up would be east of Ames. So the new Highway 30 interchange that is being constructed with Teller Avenue, that interchange is not in the city. So there's a gap of about a quarter of a mile before we get to Prairie View Industrial, and then all of the land to the south is not in the city. So we showed that as urban reserve. It was part of our discussion. It's a long-term plan, how we could serve that. It's not something we can do today, but it's something that could be done, and we wanted to preserve that option, recognizing that interchange is very important to us. over time. So Story County with this policy, it would seem, would have policy support to endorse allowing for development in those areas without it ever having to come into the city. So they could allow for a commercial facility or an industrial facility to be located by rezoning ag land to a commercial industrial zone in the county. The similar thing could happen on Highway 69 to the south of the city.
And just to be clear, and our problem with that would be what?
Our problem is it would put two things. It may undermine our investment within the city, because now you've created an outlet for development to not be in the city where we've invested in infrastructure. Secondly, the more property that develops before we annex, the less inclined they are to annex because they already invested in their own private facilities, and they're not probably likely to want to support connection districts or other things that can extend utilities to do more efficient urban development. So we'll get more efficient urban development typically if it's in the city than in the county. And the more that it's scattered into rural development, harder and harder it is for us to economically expand and provide for more efficient deployment of infrastructure and a bigger land base for us.
And I feel bad I didn't go back and watch any of the meetings where this was brought up, but could you give the council any insights? Did they give any kind of reasons for this proposal that would be helpful for us to know?
So I don't have the minutes or anything in front of me. I think just looking at the way their comp plan is written, the way I understand it, and again, I haven't had conversations with the Board of Supervisors to make sure I understand their intent. They kind of see in their comp plan, it kind of seems to indicate that once they put the urban designation on it, they're not concerned about ag preservation as much. So they've kind of written it, in my words, they're kind of writing that off from an ag preservation perspective and saying, well, it's going to be developed. We may want to see it developed now rather than later. And so it's just a different philosophy that in that area, they're not concerned about ag compatibility and ag preservation because someday it's intended to be urbanized. Now, it doesn't say it automatically gets rezoned. It says they would consider it, but I am concerned that it would move forward that way. And I want to be clear that the city does not expect that to be the case around the city. I mean, our urban reserve was meant to plan for compatibility and plan for logical expansion of the city over time.
It seems like and this is just me, it just seems a little bit like mission creep here. Why are they doing this?
I can't answer the why.
Yeah.
The why is because without the fringe plan, they have a gap in their comp plan and they're trying to fill it. And the policies they're using are ones that already exist. They're just not the same as how we would do it from our perspective.
I mean, I guess I would hope that they would have a posture of deference. We've done so much work to develop this plan. I think these should be Ames developments. If the county wants to do something to move the ball forward, we could do more with housing, which we're desperate to have in this county. So I think your letter is measured and thoughtful.
Any other comments or questions?
I should just let council know I sent Kelly some scrivener's errors that I caught in the letter. So I don't know whether that is option 2 or option 1, but I assume he's.
I think option 1 is just to direct the mayor to sign the letter so we can finalize the language.
I think that
he can
I
sign
would
what's appropriate.
concur, and there'd be some tweaks to it. But I think the intent is are you supportive in general of the tone of the letter and what's included in it?
I would move option 1.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Kelly and I will finalize it, get it going. All right, item 42, remote parking agreement for the Bridge Home.
Eloise has the next 2 items, but is there any questions on the remote parking agreement?
I just had a question about how parking requirements were calculated, but maybe that she can cover that.
She can. I'm just curious if there's no comments, we would just move forward, but she can absolutely address anything you want to know.
That was just my question. I remember at our workshop about low and moderate income housing, we talked about directing staff to come back with a proposal for reduced parking requirements for affordable housing. So I didn't know if, when we're talking about the 39 spaces that are required for the Bridge Home in this item, would would that be looked at differently once we do have a proposal for reduced parking? Because I would hate to have them comply to a standard that we know we're thinking about changing.
They need to comply because they want to get a building permit. So if we were to, so the short answer is if you change the standard, yes, this would be a project that could take advantage of that standard. So in the interim, since no change has been made, they need to have a way to comply with the code so we can issue a building permit to start construction. If after they start construction, especially because this is remote parking, and they wanted to undo that agreement, they could come back to you and say, well, now the code only requires this. Will you accept less?
Okay.
And
they could free up that remote parking.
Yeah,
for
so the
another
unique
use
part here is this is a temporary condition in their eyes in the first place.
Okay.
Because the diagram here, 214, they have no intention of keeping that as a parking lot. They desire to build a whole new facility there.
Oh.
And they're going to be coming back to talk about a different shared parking arrangement with that. So it's quite a bit different in the sense that they control both properties here, but they have no intent of that one staying a parking lot.
I see. So there won't be an issue even if we do move that requirement down, they can adapt then.
Anything you do to change the parking requirement will be in their favor in the long run.
Okay. Thank you.
They don't have to come with a parking lot design showing stormwater detention and all that, or to pull a building permit. They can just go ahead and have an agreement that they can do that.
So the difference is that it exists. So that darkened area on 214, it's already a concrete area. All they're doing is changing the approach and adding striping. So that doesn't trigger any stormwater requirements for the remote parking lot. And then the site that they're actually building the transitional living facility, it's under an acre, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't trigger stormwater either. You change the stormwater code that any existing developed site that's under an acre does not have to meet 5B. So they're taking advantage of that across the street.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought that they were moving the parking lot to 207.
Nope, they're going to build a structure on 207.
Got it.
And the majority of the parking will be across the street.
I see the arrow. I was confused by the arrow.
That arrow is trying to indicate how they would walk back to the apartment, not move the parking lot.
Got
Sorry.
it. Thank you.
We did not see it that way.
All right.
So I think we've covered the issues in this. It's an 18-unit transitional apartment being proposed for 207. They would include 13 parking spaces on this parcel, 2 of which are accessible. And then over here where there's an existing parking lot on their other property, and the rest of it, even though they're showing some houses here, it's basically a vacant lot and the parking lot's not being used by anyone else. That would provide the 27 additional spaces needed for 207 to move forward with their site plan approval. And they have signed the remote parking agreement. That's been provided to the clerk. What other questions do you have?
Any questions? Open up public comment. Anyone want to address council on this topic? Close public comment. Is there closing questions or comments? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I'd move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 43, preliminary plat for North Sunset Ridge, 798 North 500th Avenue.
Hunziker is looking to get approval of their preliminary plat for North Sunset Ridge. You've reviewed the master plan several times recently. It is extending Wilder Avenue through the development up to the north property line. It's also extending Elston Avenue up to this avenue, the street that bisects the property known as Green Street. There would be a cul-de-sac at this end. The reason for the cul-de-sac is that there's not really opportunity to create an extension to the north given the future park that's going in, and the proposed access to the park would be off of Wilder. We do have them showing a sidewalk connection here, and one of the conditions of option one is that the sidewalk location is still to be determined, and if it's not able to connect into the park at that point, it would connect back around over here to Wilder and loop through, and that causes Outlot C to be able to be counted toward their requirements for FSRL. So the outlots, there's 4 outlots that are for stormwater and water flowage, A, B, C, and D. There's currently a sewer line being extended into the property. It's coming along this piece that's in the county that's also owned by Hunsaker. There's an easement that comes down between 31 and 32, goes down to the road. The line's been upsized, and it will extend out to North 500th and end in a manhole out there so that future expansion can tie into the stormwater. So it'll be fully served by utilities. The Wilder has a shared use path on the left side that will be continued. Otherwise, sidewalks will be on both sides of the street. It meets the density requirements. It will have a total of 47 single-family homes and 16 single-family attached homes. The attached homes will be on the north side of Green, right in this area. So there won't be any attached homes immediately adjacent to Sunset Ridge. That will be on the north side of Green. The Planning and Zoning Board met on June 7th, and they did vote unanimously to approve the preliminary plat, 6-0. There was a member of the public that attended who asked the question about having a public trail connection from over here on Utah over to the park. And there's a couple of fingers of city land that tie down into Utah. So staff met to discuss the feasibility of that proposal and learned that it really is not feasible. The grades are significant. It would require a lot to put a trail in here. There's a lot of old growth native vegetation, as well as the creek and the grades. And so even though it looks pretty easy on paper, it wasn't determined to be feasible by staff, and it's not part of a master plan. And with that, I will just say that staff has found this consistent with the amended contract rezoning agreement and amended master plan, the zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and Ames Plan 2040. It's been reviewed by staff and found to meet city standards and utilities, including city water, city sanitary sewer, Ames Electric, and consumers energy will be extended into the subdivision. Sidewalks will be constructed on both sides of all streets, and the shared use path on Wilder Avenue will be extended. Therefore, it's a recommendation of the city manager that the city council approve alternative 1 with the identified conditions. And the conditions are, as I mentioned, the exact location of that sidewalk connection that goes to the north through Outlot C, as well as accommodation and coordination of street trees with final improvement plans related to streetlights, fire hydrants, and single-family attached unit driveways to be approved prior to the final plat approval. Are there any questions?
Questions?
So I just want to clarify, in the main council action form, we have the statement about the proposed Clear Creek Trail, that staff does not believe there's a feasible option for a path in this area due to those conditions you outlined. And then in the addendum, there's still under open space this note about Plan 2040 identifying the potential for a greenway along Clear Creek. So have we now ruled out what we thought was possible in Plan 2040 based on site visit?
Yes.
So,
So we have greenways that are shown in a lot of places for the growth areas. Generally, just followed creeks. So there isn't a trail plan at this point for those. And when you go into the trails element, has a clear policy that there has to be a case by case review about the practical nature of doing these things and the cost. So when staff was asked to look at this by the Planning and Zoning Commission, that's when we determined that 15% grades were unworkable to do this, and just don't believe it's something that could be done. So yes, the greenway designation will still exist on Ames Plan 2040 because it will follow the creek path into the park, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's always a trail in a greenway.
okay.
Does that help
makes
kind of
sense.
split it up? So it's there for planning purposes, but it has to be case by case. So when we get so if we get the walk and roll plan done and it says, yep, critical that we have a path along a greenway, well, then we'll need to not just assume it's down by the channel of the creek. It may need to be adjacent on the uplands area instead of down here. So in this case, we don't have any space to do anything. So it could only go down by the channel. In the other growth areas, we can plan for it to be on the uplands area and still have the greenway trail. So that's kind of how it's supposed to work. Here we're just working with the hand that we were dealt 30 years ago.
Other questions? Kelly, maybe you can't answer this question. I was just curious. I see we have a 12-inch sanitary sewer going down there, and it goes all the way to almost to County Line Road. Is that sized to allow for future housing to the north?
And to the west. So this is a oversized project. We're paying for part of it. Hunziker's paying for a substantial amount of it, and it opens up hundreds of acres into Boone County, consistent with Ames Plan 2040. So we did that as an agreement last summer.
Same as water too.
Water will be Xenia territory in Boone, so there is no oversized, there's no looping planned out here any longer because of the Xenia agreement as they would serve development in Boone.
How about to the west of the new park and east of the...
Yep, to the east of County Line Road is us, to the west is Xenia.
Just thinking that, I think that when we talked about buying that land for the park, there was also some property that was potentially could be developed into housing between County Line Road and our park. And given the amount of money that everyone's investing for water and for sewer, just making sure that that can be all served without us having to come back and do additional, infrastructure.
So Hunziker controls the interest in the significant property that's at the northwest corner there. Mm-hmm. So they're very in tune to how the sewer will connect into this project. Water will come up through Wilder so that we have advantage of it when we put park facilities in. I think long-term, the city's water plan plans for looping up to Ontario. That might have to occur through the park because the subdivision on the northwest corner doesn't actually touch Ontario because of the creek that's there. So there's some version of looping that'll eventually happen, but we're going to take the water up from the south to the city park.
Very good. Open up public comment. Anyone want to comment on this to council?
We just need 10 more of these.
Close public input. Entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Would that be alternative number one?
Yes.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to item number 44, final plat for North Dayton Industrial Subdivision, second edition.
This is a minor subdivision, no public improvements. Is there any questions?
Any questions for staff on this one? All right, entertain a motion.
Move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 45, final plat for Iowa State University Research Park, Phase 3, 5th edition.
Yeah, so we had a preliminary plat for the build out of Phase 3 expansion of ISU Research Park. So as this is noticed, this is the 5th edition. So this is an area that was shown as multiple lots in the preliminary plat. The research park over time has carved up some of this land to be moved into the Ames Fitness site. So that's where the tennis bubble is, and the expansion of the tennis bubble is planned. So as that land got used up, they decided it was better utility to do this as one lot. That is allowable within our subdivision code. It's a minor amendment to your plat to reduce lots. So we recommend approval. The public improvements are related to a sanitary sewer extension and a water main extension, and eventually a water sidewalk connection will also go to the south here.
Questions?
So play this out for the future. I'm supportive of the staff recommendation, but where do we go from here with this parcel? So if there was an interest in the research park to carve this up, what does it look like procedurally given what we're doing tonight?
So they have a preliminary plat. So they're platting a large outlot for the east side of the site off of Riverside. They can, per the preliminary plat that's approved, another small street extension would come off of Riverside and curve to the south, and they can take a few lots off of a street extension off of the Riverside site of that outlot.
So maybe this is obvious. So if there's a plan to do that, what is the purpose of this intermediate step?
They're creating a buildable lot. They're making one buildable lot right now and reserving the rest as an outlot for future development.
I see. Okay.
Yep. So
Well, they have a plan to put their laboratory there,
they're going to build a building.
their laboratory, a research laboratory that's going to service, probably be a draw for future businesses to want to locate there. So it's actually a university installation that they're going to build there.
And sidewalks would be built on University as well as Riverside, or just University?
So with this proposal, the way the subdivision code is written, only the lot that's being platted for development triggers the sidewalk. So only University will get sidewalks now. In the future, when they do an addition on the Riverside, that's the Riverside side of the site that would trigger sidewalks.
I see. And so will it be a regular sidewalk, or will it be a wider bike path?
On University, it's a 5-foot walk. The shared use path is extended on the west side of University right now. So it would continue as a shared use path as development ever occurs on the west side of University.
Okay.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Move alternative 1.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on. Number 46, hearing approving the submittal of a substantial amendment to the CDBG Home 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is our substantial amendment to our current action plan, where we are going to be looking to add a public infrastructure improvement project along the north of, gosh, where are we doing this at? Maple. This was in the 25-26 capital improvements plan, where we're going to be doing a 4-inch water main. It is located in our census tract 10, which is a low-income census tract. And we made this adjustment talking to Public Works and looking at trying to spend some additional funds as we want to spend down our funds as we try to begin selling our Baker subdivision lot. So this was an opportunity to get a larger project in to help reduce that. And we're anticipating with working with Public Works, it'll be just over $500,000. The amendment went out for public comment. I had not received any comments during the comment period. And so we're bringing it before you to get this submitted so that we can add this to our current plan. Even though it's close to the end of our fiscal year, we will be rolling that over so that we can get it spent, hopefully starting this fall. And then we just made some shifts from the adopted budget to the proposed budget to add that plan.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, I'll declare the public hearing on the substantial amendment to the CDBG Home 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertaining a motion on resolution approving the submittal of substantial amendment.
Move approval. Second.
Vanessa, one question. So I'm supportive of this. I'm sort of curious, if we weren't doing this project, was this a project that was in line to be done at some point in the future by Public Works?
Yes, it was in their 25, 26 capital
Okay.
improvements plan.
I see that. I apologize. Yep.
No
Very
problem.
good. Thank you.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to item number 47, hearing on nuisance assessments. Any questions for staff on this item? Declare the public hearing on the proposed nuisance assessments to the properties listed in the council action form to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing and hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution assessing costs of snow and ice removal and certifying assessments to Story County Treasurer.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Moving on to number 48, entertain a motion on second reading of ordinance to rezone with master plan for 4098 East 13th Street, JT Warehouse.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Item 49, entertain a motion approving third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4503 on zoning text amendment on setback encroachments for accessory structures.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 50, entertain a motion on approval of third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4504 on revising Chapter 28 of the Municipal Code to amend the industrial pretreatment local limits.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, disposition of communications to council. We have two. We have a letter from Stephen Ann Bergeson, Ansley Owner Developers. Is there an interest? Go ahead.
Memo on staff?
Yes,
From
refer to
staff.
memo for staff. We'll explain what's going on.
I move for a memo.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And then second is just a memo from Sarah Van Meechen regarding
Just
just
had a citizen who complained about that specific property and what staff is doing to handle it, and that's the response. You all got a letter from a citizen.
I think this is really a good example of the extent that staff goes to try and work with someone on a complaint-driven, basis. So if someone has concerns about there being some kind of abuse, I think this is a good example of how they're really trying to work with the occupant and trying to come to some kind of resolution without. But if things don't happen over a long period of time, they need to be taken care of. Okay. All right. Move on to council comments. Gloria.
Welcome back, Mayor.
Thank you.
And I hope the visit to Japan was useful for Ames' future economic and social endeavors. We received an email praising the work of our city assessor's office. And I just want to commend them for working very effectively with the citizens during some very challenging times for assessors across Iowa.
Thank you. Tim?
Along those same lines, I've had two interactions with Ames PD where they were trying to help someone in a challenging situation, and just blown away by the above and beyond service that our Ames PD provides so proud of our rank and file officers. Just wanted to pass on that commendation.
Nita?
Just wanted to say thank you again to Diane Shildreth, who was for
Deb.
her.
Deb Shildreth.
Deb. Why did I say Diane? I'm sorry. Late. To Deb for your great work here at the city, and you'll be missed.
Amber?
Nothing for me. Nothing tonight.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nothing.
Nothing. All right. Well, we got a 4th of July parade coming up next Tuesday. So looking forward to seeing people there. And regarding the trip to Japan, it was really actually exceeded expectations. And they just really set a very high bar. They are planning, an adult delegation is planning on coming in October, and which would include hopefully the mayor of Koshu City and several business individuals. And we're going to have a short presentation report at the July 11th meeting. Cindy Hicks is going to come. We haven't got it all fleshed out yet, but hopefully maybe we have a little slideshow. Maybe Rachel can share some of her impressions. We're trying to aggregate what are three takeaways. We had 10 people go, and just had a really positive interactions with not only the elected officials, but also with the business. We had a tremendous meeting with their Chamber of Commerce and did some really neat noodling and brainstorming on some ways to really strengthen the city, the sister city partnership. So I think that this is reinvigorated. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I think it really, when we ended on Thursday, I think it was really, people are really excited about the opportunities. And but it was a great celebration for 30th anniversary. And I'm just thrilled. They're really excited about continuing. And I think that we can look at ways to really broaden it significantly. So we're still trying to pin the dates down in October, but we'll certainly make council aware of that. I would like you to participate, in some of the events. And just a fun fact to know and tell, I didn't realize it, but they have 40 wineries. They basically are the Napa Valley of Japan. Yeah, we went to every one in only 3 days too. It's pretty good. So, but it's just it was an amazing short but amazing trip, and we just it was exciting to share with you what we saw. And you want to add anything, Rachel?
No, I'm good.
And we found some interesting things that were different as well too. So anyway. And I joked that my kids would be proud because I was eating Japanese food too. All right. With that, Mark, do we have a justification for council to go into a closed session?
Yes, per Iowa Code Section 20.17, subsection 3, the council can go into closed session to discuss collective bargaining matters.
All right. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, we're back in open session and entertain a motion on resolution ratifying collective bargaining agreement with public, professional, and maintenance employees, Local 2003 for July 1st, 2023 to June 30, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 All right. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.